Welcome back to Algebra 1. One of the things that we always have to keep in mind is that we might want to factor out a greatest common factor. I look at all of my numbers, I see what is going to go into them. I see that 5 goes into all of my numbers. And when I write that down, I want to have the 5 in front of a set of parentheses, and I have x squared minus 5 divided by 5 is 1. And 5 divided by 5 is 1 again. I am going to find it useful to factor out a negative 1. In this case, I can actually factor out a negative and an x. When I do that, I put that in front. That is going to be a solution for me. And I'm going to divide each of these by negative x. That's going to end up giving me an x squared minus 12x plus, okay, I also have several more down here. I'm taking a look and seeing sometimes I'm going to factor out just a variable, like this guy, I'm going to factor out a y. I do like to look at my smallest number and hope that that's going to go into all of them. And these are a couple of the other problems that we have here. So this next step is to be able to factor trinomials when the leading coefficient, that means the number in front of the largest variable, isn't 1. There's a lot of methods. I'm going to show you 3 on here. We're going to do some examples of each of those. I'm going to try it out on all of them, see which ones you like. It's not about picking one method, it's about picking a method that works for you. So step 1 on this one, I have this square. I'm going to use the area method. And in the square, I place the first term in the first position up here, top left, and the last term, the constant, goes in the bottom right. Next step. So factors of A times C that add to give me B. I'm going to see that in all of the different methods. Here's my list of factors, and you notice that because my original was negative, AC is negative, B is positive, that means that my smaller term has to be negative. So I put my negative in the smaller term here. I tried 1, I tried 2, I tried 3, and 4's on my list. I know I'm done, but what I'm looking for is the pattern that works to give me 1. Here it is. Those are the 2 numbers I'm going to use. Where they go in the square is on both of these. It does not matter which one goes where. And you notice that I added an x to both of those. Once I have the square set up, what I do is factor out a greatest common factor by row and by column. So if I take a look at the columns first, in this column here, the only thing that I have in common is an x. Here, what I have in common, well, 2 goes into both of these, so I'm going to put a 2 here. Completely separate, I'm going to go by row, and in this particular row, I can factor out a 2 and factor out an x. And in this one, because they're both negatives, I'm going to factor out a negative. And both of these are divisible by 3, so there are my greatest common factors. Once I have those, I write out the factors from the very top row, x plus 2 here, and from the very left column, 2x minus 3. Once I have those, I can set each factor equal to 0, solve. That means I'm going to move these over, and I am taking a shortcut. I'm not showing, but it changes sign. This guy's got a couple of steps. I do have to add 3 to both sides. That's going to make it positive, and then divide by 2. So x could also equal positive 3/2. Okay, those are the steps to the area method. Now we're just going to use the steps without writing down what I I do each time. So we start out with our first and last term in these two spots. Then I am looking at the factors of, I'm going to multiply these two things together. I get negative 12. Factors of that are going to add to give me positive 4. So I have negative 1 and 12. That won't work. Negative 2 and 6. And since that works, I'm going to stop. I put one of them here with an x, and I put the other one here with an x. Again, does not matter which order we put them. Then we're going to factor out common factors. From both of these, I can take out a 2. From both of these variables, I can take out an x. From both of these, I can take out a 3. Completely separate, looking this way. Those both divisible by 2 and divisible by x. Because these are both negative, I'm going to factor out a negative. I don't see anything else here, so I do want to write this as a negative 1. That's going to tell me that my factors, writing across the top column that I wrote, putting in a plus sign, and writing down the left-hand side with the negative sign. So if I am solving these, 2x plus 3 equals 0. Moving the 3, it becomes a negative 3. Dividing by 2. I do prefer you to write horizontal fractions. And on this one, 2x minus 1, well, it's going to change its sign when I come over, right? Notice that was a slight shortcut. Dividing by 2, fractions are perfectly allowed, and we have our two solutions. Next problem, we have it set up in our squares. The multiplication that we have is 10 factors of 10 that add to give me negative 11. So they both have to be negatives, and negative 1 and negative 10. That would multiply to get me this, add to get me this. So I'm going to write negative 1x and negative 10x. Then I'm going to get the factors, and I can take a 2 out of this and an x out of this. Since this term is a negative, I'm going to pull out a negative 1. Factoring out of these, I'm going to get an x. Factoring out here, I'm going to factor out a 5. Since this term is negative, I'm going to factor out a 5. And we have x minus 5 across the top, and 2x minus 1. And if I am solving that, when I set it equal to 0 and move it over, changes sign, this guy's going to change sign, and it's going to be 1 over 2. So let's take a look at another problem. Now, please don't forget that there are greatest common factors, and if I pull them out, it's going to make my life easier. So I'm going to pull this out, and then what I notice is a is not 5 anymore, a is 1. So I can just go factors of c, because 1 times c is c, that add to give me b, and that's going to be 1 and 2. So I'm going to have x plus 1 and x plus 2. Now I still have this 5 out here, but 5 doesn't equal 0. Change the sign when I take these out. Change the sign when I take it out.